appears the night, and I will rise among the saints. My gaze transfixed on Jesus' face. Oh, praise your blood is healing every wound. Your blood is making all things new. Your blood speaks a better word. Do you believe it? Your blood, the measure of my worth. Your blood, more.
Well, hello. Welcome to our Family and Life Assembly of God Roundtable discussion. My name is Steve Lorenz. To my left here, your right, will be Pastor Lemoyne Lytle. The other side of me here, Jeremy Verway, running sound and video. Does a pretty good job. I've heard I need to speak up, so I'm going to try to do that. People can't hear me. I'm going to try and get there. So on our roundtable discussion, we just pick a piece of Scripture and we do some studying on it. We have a discussion about it, and we try to bring our discussion to you. And so without no further ado, our focus this week is Colossians chapter 12 to 17, and next week we'll probably be on from 18 to 25. We were originally going to get to 25. We realized it's just too much in it for us to cover in one night, so bear with us. We'll get there, and hopefully you'll enjoy the ride. So I guess I will read starting with verse 12 in Colossians chapter 3, verse 12. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive it as the Lord forgave you, and over all these virtues put on love, which binds them together in perfect unity. Now, last week we talked about what not to do, kind of in the passages that we did before. We went from verses 5 to verse 11. And this week we're kind of into what you should do. So as far as what we should do, any thoughts on that?
Well, just again, a little background. Paul is writing this letter to the church in Colossians. So he's writing it to the church, and like you said from last week, we discussed things that you are to put off, things that you are to put away, things that you're supposed to put to death. You know, and
They actually use the word death.
Right.
yeah, he does here in Scripture, and you know, all the negative things that are going on in our lives. And then, like you said, I love the fact that it says, to start off that verse, it says, therefore. It says, therefore. So, in other words, you know, again, like Tony, I think it was last week that said, you know, you don't have to do those negative things. You know, therefore, there's more to it. There is more that is happening here, and so therefore, you know, as God's chosen people, how many times do we really believe that we're? I think the New King James Version says elect. Therefore, is the elect of God. You know, how many times do we look at ourselves as chosen? I mean, you know, we don't necessarily do that all the time. You know.
Right.
But what are we chosen for?
We had this discussion a little bit earlier, and it was interesting what we came up with too, because you know, you think God's chosen people. Well, what do you think of? You think of the Israelites were led out into the desert, and you know, you're thinking about that. But we're chosen too.
Right.
But what are we chosen for?
And you know, one of the things we talked about earlier, we're chosen to serve Him, to follow Him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the chosen ones are His believers, and so that's what we're chosen for. And then it kind of tells us how we're to do that. You know, how are we to follow Him? That's what we're talking about here, in starting with verse 12. You know, you put on. So is what the New King James Version said. You read
A New International.
no, in NIV you read
Yeah.
clothing, or what was it?
Clothe yourself.
Yeah,
Clothe yourself.
Clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience.
But you know, so many times we look at that, we go, okay, I'm chosen to serve. We're supposed to serve God, but you know, it's service for the kingdom, to the kingdom, for the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know, it's not a personal benefit. It's, you know, we're supposed to serve the world. You know, and for us to serve the world, we have to put on these things. We have to clothe ourselves. You know, and it's so important that we do that. And like you said, Paul lists 5 things here, and he starts off with compassion. You know, he starts off with you know, the big one, it seems like. But you know, actually, we talked about last week. We put off, or put on, or put off, or put to death 5 things. We put off and rid ourselves of 5 things. And now Paul is telling us to put on these 5 things. And you know, each one that we're going to talk about here, it's a choice. You know, that's why I like it. You know, if you're going to put on clothes, you have to choose what clothes you're going to put on, right?
Well, and if you took off the clothing that you had on that was, and I'll read it again that I have, it said it belonged to your earthly nature, sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed. But if you take that off, well, now you're naked.
Mm-hmm.
So let's put some clothes on, right? What are
Right.
we going to put on for clothes?
Right.
We're going to put on kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, and compassion.
Yep.
And these is what you need to equip yourself with, so that you go out into the world ready for the world.
Correct. So then what's compassion?
I would say, you know, it's where you're filled with love and concern for others instead of selfish desires. You're not thinking about yourself. You're not saying, you know, I want this today. I don't care what everybody else thinks. You're thinking about your neighbor first. You're thinking about the other people first. You have compassion and care. You care about their feelings and you care about their well-being.
It's not all about me.
Right.
Which is contrary to our world.
Right.
You know,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm number one. You know, that's what the world looks at it, and that's not the way that you show compassion. I had compassion as being moved emotionally to relieve the need in question. So as you said, you're thinking of others. You're looking at that and going, okay, what can I, how can I show compassion? How can I help whatever your need may be? Because, we come across that all the time. People
Right.
that are hurting, people that need, whatever it might, all kinds of things,
Oh yeah, you don't have to look very far either.
Correct. Just walking down the street,
Mm.
you'll see it. It's
Mhm.
of, hey, I need a job. I need, and I grant you something you can't fulfill, but you can be a stepping stone,
Right.
to help that.
Well,
But it's
listen.
having that compassion.
If it's 20 below and your neighbor's wood box is empty and you got extra wood, my compassion says maybe I should go build a fire in his,
Right.
deliver some
Right.
wood. I mean, it's simple. A lot of the thing is just simple human needs that people need.
I was thinking back to with that word compassion. I was thinking back to when Jesus went to Mary and Martha after their brother Lazarus had died, and the word says that Jesus wept. He had compassion for the need that was there, and he went above and beyond the need, of bringing Lazarus back to life. But we come across those every day, and we just kind of blow by it. Well, I've got to get to work. I'm
Well,
busy.
when we think of compassion, one of the things I think about is it's not, so many times we think, well, what if I do this and then I won't have enough for this or whatnot. And we have to remember we need to trust God. If He's telling us to do something and show compassion to someone, that's what we need to be doing.
That's right.
Because God will take care of us.
You know that story you talked about with Lazarus. Mary and Martha were not happy that he was there because he was late, and he was dead. And
He was
still
four-
showed compassion.
4 days late.
Yes, yes. And if you read the Bible, the story says that he rose him.
Yep.
Right.
And brought him back out.
He brought him back out.
I had a quote here by Bertrand Russell. It says, "There are certain things that our age needs or our world needs. The root of the matter is very simple and an old-fashioned thing. A thing so simple that I am almost ashamed to mention it. The thing I mean is love. Christian love or compassion." How many times, and he says it's an old-fashioned thing, but you look back at like the wagon trains or when they were coming west, man, if they saw somebody broke down or somebody that was being attacked, whatever, they had compassion. They would stop and help them, and they didn't just go, "Hey, see you down the road," somewhere, but they had that compassion. They stopped and helped.
And now, if you see a car on the side of the road, it's like, well, they got cell phone. It's what a lot of people say.
Exactly. They are not by themselves.
Right, but we need to be listening to God's voice because sometimes He will tell you to stop.
Mhm.
And you need to be always listening to His voice to show that compassion.
Otherwise,
So-
it's interesting you brought that up because then it's, in our world today, you can get so fearful.
Right?
Okay, if I pull over to help this person, what's going to happen to me? Again, then it becomes
How do I
me
know that?
focus.
How do I know that they don't have COVID and I'm gonna get it from them? I mean, there's
There's all
things-
kinds of things.
Yeah.
Right.
It
goes-
endless.
It goes back to that word we talked about. I don't know if it was last week or a couple weeks ago. That big 2-letter word, if.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Smallest
You know.
word in a sentence with a whole lot of implications and meaning.
Right.
But it's we have to have compassion. We have to put that on as Christians, especially. You have to clothe yourself in that and to put that on. Otherwise, man, you're just gonna be miserable all the time. I would think,
Right.
So
after compassion here, we see kindness, and showing kindness to others. When I think of kindness, I think of the golden rule in Luke 6:31. Do to others as you would have them do unto you.
Mhm.
Show the kindness that you would expect someone to show to you.
right.
That's what it's saying here is
So
true kindness.
So do you think it's easier to show kindness or compassion?
Well, I think kindness probably, isn't it?
I think overall, I would agree with
I would
that.
agree with that.
I mean, because it is easier to be kind to somebody. I can put a smile on my face, or I can say an encouraging word.
Right.
You know, whereas compassion is going to get to me. It's going to get to my heart. You know,
Right.
because it's a little deeper.
And they're in here, and they're not interchangeable, those words.
No.
Kindness and compassion are not. Now,
Right.
they got similarities, but they're
Correct.
not interchangeable.
Correct. That's very true. And then we go into humility, which I believe that's also what the New King James says. So,
Yep.
but you know, humility. So I can just boast about everything, all my strengths, you know, and everything that I do well, and
Well, go ahead, but you're not following the
that's not
verse.
following scripture. That's not what humility is.
That would probably be pride.
No.
That would probably be pride.
I mean, you don't be arrogant.
Correct.
You know, humility is where you're not arrogant, and you're not unfair towards other people. You know, you're being humble. I don't know how to.
No, you're
Well,
you're-
that's just
you're
it.
getting
You're
that's for
thinking.
sure.
You're thinking of others first.
Right.
You know, it's not a selfishness. It's a, and I know it's not a word, but it's an otherness first. You know, other-ish.
Yeah.
You know, so you're putting other people first. You know, and you know, there's nothing wrong with the talents that God's given each one of us. You know, there's nothing wrong with us being. I mean, you're great with computers. You know, you're great with mechanics. You know, I'm average at everything and master of none. You know, so but you know, it's.
I can't do a sermon every week. You got it on us for sure. You?
You know, but it's thinking about others. You know, and there's I saw an example of a baseball player is not going to go if he's a great baseball player or football, whatever you want. He's not going to get up there and go, yeah, I'm just average. You know, if he's hitting 1,000 home runs a year or whatever, or, he's God's given him some talent. He's worked at it, but you can still show humility and have those strengths. I guess is what I'm saying. So, but just not boasting about it. Not letting that pride.
Well, I mean, like a baseball player, they put that's on a different stage too, and the world's looking at you too. So I mean, it's I think it would easy to lose your humility at that point in time because I mean, you are an exalted individual right there. I mean, one of the few.
Right.
Right.
There's good examples both sides of that.
But a good humble football player. I've heard football players saying, yes, they know they're a good football player, but they give credit to God. That He's given them that ability. And he wants to share his faith with others because he's able to do this.
And they're on a stage that people are watching them.
Right.
And they're promoting Christianity.
So, I mean, that's showing humility.
Mm-hmm.
So then we go on after that, and it's meekness. And meekness, that was a fun one.
I have gentleness in
Right.
mind, but meekness.
Meekness. I looked at meekness. I was like, well, when you think of meekness, what do you think of?
Weakness.
Weakness.
Right, and so it's I actually looked up the Greek word for what it is mentioning there, and I don't know how to say it. It's like proteta or something.
Just so you know, nobody else here.
Tried. And one of the things I thought of it's not an attitude of fear or the suggestion that Christians ought to be timid. Rather, it's talking about how a meek person, they know how to control their strength and their power, rather than abuse it. I mean, that's essentially what meekness is they have strength and power, but they control it.
Right. It's like it's a harnessed strength rather than a spinelessness. And I had a couple examples, and like a stallion that's been broken and bridled. The power's still there that you're talking about, but it's being controlled by that bit that's in that horse's mouth, and to make it go where it's supposed to go and do what it's supposed to do, and I'm not talking about cruelty to animals. I'm just, but that's an example of gentleness or meekness. The other example I saw was, if you think about it, is a large trained dog. You've got Ebony, and I know she's still a pup.
Right.
But you have a large trained dog who will play with toddlers and be gentle. But yet when a thief shows up or a burglar shows up at the house, that dog's going to come unglued. It's going
Or so
to,
you hope.
Right.
it's going to protect. So again, that power coming out, but you have the gentleness, man, playing with a little kid, because you don't want that dog to go off on that kid.
Right. I mean, the dog's so gentle, it's actually called mouthing, where it'll just put its mouth around the arm, not bite at all, but lead him, the kid,
Right.
and that's showing true gentleness.
Right.
But yeah, exactly. When it comes down to it, they have true power. They just know how to show meekness.
Correct. That's what it's all about. I mean, because so many times we look at it as that weakness, or and a lot of people look at Christ that way. A lot of people look at him and say, well, he was meek. You hear there in Matthew the Beatitudes, the meek will inherit the earth. Again, it's not a sign of weakness. It's just controlling those strengths. Harnessing those strengths.
And he's probably the best example you can use, because you don't think of him as an overpowering person, but yet he had the full authority of God at his fingertips. And if there was ever true power, if there was ever true power, he had control of it. Can you imagine? I couldn't imagine me with that kind of power. I just don't. To be meek is truly a gift.
Right. How many times do we think we're thankful that we're not God? Because
right.
Well, you just cut me off from that lane.
Where's your compassion?
Exactly.
Right?
Road rage jerk, right? Road rage.
But
so then on the last that we got there is patience.
And New King James says long suffering.
Suffering.
As you put it, suffering long, right?
No.
But patience. How many times do we pray for patience and then get upset when God starts granting it to us?
I was told early on, if you pray for patience, you better mean it. So it's very true. You pray for patience, be ready for it.
I always like the one I heard. I pray to God for patience and hurry up, would you?
Exactly.
We don't have any patience.
Right.
We just don't. And patience is something that's a virtue gift in itself.
And there seems like there's always something or someone that can set our trigger off, and we're quick to lose our temper over it. I'm older than both of you guys, but I've found that as I've gotten older, I don't lose my temper as quickly, as what I did when I was younger. It's like, really, you're gonna do that, or you're gonna say that about me, and God wouldn't tell us to put on patience or long suffering if we couldn't do it with God's help.
Yeah, I've heard if God can take you to it, he can bring you through it.
That's right. That's right.
So you just, that's when you definitely need to have a good relationship with God.
Right.
Yeah, so we just need to show patience. I have 4 kids. I have to practice patience. Otherwise, it's not fun at home. So, every day I have to practice
right.
it.
But but look at God. Look how much patience he has with us.
Yeah, we're stubborn.
Very much so. I want it my way or no
Right.
way. It's
Right.
that,
What are you doing, God? That's not what I planned at all.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I had this straight and narrow path, and I don't know where I am now.
If God didn't have patience, man, we would all been dead before we were born. Just because we just keep messing up all the time, but
Right.
So it has to hurt him looking at his kids messing up all the time, just like it hurts us, and then we get upset, and then we have to go apologize to our kids. I don't know if you guys, how easy is that? To go, hey,
Admit you're wrong as a parent.
exactly.
Right.
Hey, I messed up. I shouldn't have dropped the hammer on you on that. I should have stepped back and thought through this. Rather than saying, what, you're now grounded for life. How am I going to
the next life?
Exactly. How am I going to enforce that? But it is showing that patience.
Right.
I was grounded one time in my life, and I had got in trouble with the car, and my mom said, "You're grounded," and she took my keys, and 15 minutes later, she goes, "Hey, go to the store and get some bread, or get something from the store." And I looked at her, and I said, "I can't, I'm grounded." After I picked myself up off the floor, then I went to the store, and my grounding was over,
Right.
But it's like, man, show some patience, and and understand that we're all going to mess up, we're all going to screw up. So, but that brings us to verse 13, doesn't it?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. We go through 12 now.
Bearing with one another and forgiving one another, if anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. I had bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Wow, that's hard. That is just that's hard. Bear up with each other. We're told to put up with a lot. And I think that goes. I mean, I found it ironic, though. I guess not ironic, but God's planning that He talks about us forbearing or bearing with one another right after He talks about patience.
Oh, right.
I mean, isn't that what patience is? Bearing with each other and putting up with
Right.
all of each other's flaws.
And this is how you do it.
And forgiving.
Yeah,
We put up with them and also forgive.
correct.
It's not just put up; it's forgiving as well. Because other Christians will, we're not perfect, so we will sin and we will offend others. But we
And
need
sometimes
to forgive.
it's truly not intentional.
Right,
But
exactly.
offending is offending. I mean, and
You mean Christians don't say the right thing all the time, or do the right thing all the time?
No,
Wow.
I mean that like Tony said last week. I mean, church is for it's the hurting. It's a healing process. So yeah, we're gonna get offended, and we need to forgive those who offend us.
And it says right there, forgive as the Lord forgave you. When I read that, I was like, He went to that cross for me. He went to that cross for everybody that's listening, or for each one of us, but He forgave all of our sins. And how can we serve a God that did that for us and then go and do those 10 things that we talked about last week, or not clothe ourselves with these 5 things that we're talking about here? It's, man, what great love did He have for us? That I think you had scripture there, didn't you?
The
John 3:16.
Yeah, for God so I read that earlier. Well, I read it I guess earlier, but John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish but have everlasting life." And that just says, it says it all. God loved us so much, He gave His only Son, His only begotten Son, and all we have to do is believe in Him and trust in Him, and we'll have eternal life.
and that applies from there on after, and it would apply to the person that nailed Him to the cross too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone whosoever believes.
And that's how much we're supposed to forgive others, is
Right.
how much God forgave us there.
But for us that have experienced that true forgiveness, how can we harbor grievances or offenses against somebody else then?
Well, we can't. We can't.
But we do it. But we do it.
do. And when we do that, it affects not them, because they don't know you're harboring that against them. It affects you,
Correct.
and it affects your walk with God.
Right.
And that's the thing is that's why I try to remember. If I have some grievances towards someone, if I have to talk to them about it, I will. Sometimes it's just, hey, I need to forgive them. Not even talk to them, just forgive them, because they don't know what they did and they didn't really do anything wrong.
And
I
that
just
can be
got
true.
offended.
And that can be true too.
Right.
I mean, you can step on somebody's toes and not even know you did it.
Right.
Correct. And the Bible tells us if you have aught against your brother, go talk to him. You know, don't just harbor that in.
Right.
I know you were talking earlier about people that hold that in, Steve. You know, of just and letting that fester in there. And you know, when you hold that all in there, at some point it's going to come out.
And sometimes it'll come out in a way of, hey, do you know what so and so did? But that's not okay either, because that's not forgiving.
Correct. I read this statement when I was looking at this. It says, because every person in the world is different from every other person to some degree, each is bound to find characteristics in others that grate against his own characteristics. This does not change when we become Christians. Sometimes the differences among people seemingly become more than they can bear, and they say things they should not say to one another. In these cases, the only recourse is to ask for forgiveness and to be quick to grant forgiveness to one another. You know, like you said, you know, how many times do we expect somebody to forgive us, but then we won't forgive somebody else?
That's true.
I mean, you know.
And I think it's easier probably to forgive in the moment and just be done with it. Because that's right when it happened. That's right when it happened. And if you can get yourself to the point that you can do that at that moment, it's done.
Right.
It's just done. You have diffused the situation. There's no more worrying about it.
Right.
Well,
That's
and
exactly
I
true.
you know, that even goes back up to verse 2 up there that we talked about last week. It says, set your minds on things above. You know, so if you're doing that, like what you're saying, then it's going to register in you a lot quicker for you to go, man, I messed up. Can you forgive me?
Right. It's in the moment. Yeah.
And, you know, how many times do we say, you know, we ask for forgiveness, but we put conditions on it? Or we say, you know, you did this, instead of saying, hey, I'm sorry.
You know what I'm kind of getting out of this thing is you kind of got to train yourself to be a Christian, don't you? I mean, you have to be in it, and you have to practice it,
Yep.
and it has to be habitual, and you don't even think about it.
Right.
After a while, you don't
It
even
becomes
think about
it becomes a habit,
Mm-hmm.
like you
The
said.
more you do it, it becomes a habit. I mean, that's the thing is, anything you do, it becomes more natural. Is really what happens. So,
you know,
go ahead.
and sometimes, you know, things happen and we hold on to it for a long time. I read a quote from David Livingston, who wrote to his friend. He said, some 20 years after an incident, he says, I often think I have forgiven, as I hope to be forgiven, but the remembrance of the slander often comes boiling up, although I hate to think of it. You must remember me in your prayers, that more of the Spirit of Christ may be imparted to me. In other words, man, every day, like you said, it's you're training yourself, but every day we're drawing closer to Christ so that we can truly forgive whatever incident might have happened. I mean, this is 20 years. 20 years of holding on to that. You know,
That's a generation of.
yeah, it's just eating you alive. You know, so.
And that it's negative, and you know, I mean, you feel like you should. I mean, there shouldn't be that much room for negativity. I mean, if you could turn that around and be positive towards something, wouldn't it be so much better? I mean, just use your energy towards something good.
Right.
Well,
You want to keep going? It's 7:30.
I know, I saw that. So, do we want to wrap up the rest next week, or do we want to wrap up verse 14?
Let's do verse
Let's do
14,
14,
and we'll wrap it up there, and then we can continue
All right.
next
All
week from there. So, because verse 14 is the
Right.
key to it all.
Right.
You
But
know.
above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection.
Okay. And in the NIV it says, and over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity.
Right.
That's what holds it all together, you know. And I love the fact that it says it's just not being in unity, but it's in perfect unity.
Mm-hmm.
And that can only come from God. You know, and us opening our lives, like what you talked about, Steve, of letting God speak through our lives.
So we've got compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Put them all together in perfect unity. And all these virtues put on in love, which binds them together in perfect unity. So that's really
And how many times, though, do we not allow God's love to flow through us? We might have some love flowing through us, but is it God's love flowing through us?
Right.
You know, and that's so important that we wrap it all in love. I wanted to. I know we're gonna wrap it up here, but you know we've been talking here about clothing ourselves with these 5 things you just read again, Steve. But you know, I saw this in this book. It's called The Character Clothing in Colossians, and we talked about clothing, all these things. And so I just want to encourage you with this, that you put on the glasses of forgiveness, a special lens for dealing with defects in others. You know, again, we talked about it, a couple weeks ago of, it's easier for me to point out your flaws than it is for me to look at my own, but having forgiveness that we talked about, which is found in verse 13 there, the shirt of compassion. In other words, a feeling expressed from deep within. That's what we talked about. That's what true compassion is. There in verse 12. Kindness, a reversible vest to compassion. Then you have the overalls of humility. Okay, now, this book was written about a little ways back, but the overalls, of humility, to clothe yourself in that. And then I love this one, the shoes of patience, because both of those can wear thin. I mean, you wear your shoes out, how many times do we let our patience run thin? And then the kid gloves of gentleness or meekness to handle people with a velvet touch, instead of being hard-handed or anything like that. And then I have the galoshes of bearing with each other, reinforced to put up with a lot. When you put galoshes over your shoes, you're reinforcing everything. So you have that so that you can bear up with whatever comes your way.
Oh, you can wade through anything with them on.
That's right. And then the last, like what we just talked about, love, the overcoat over all these virtues. How important is that we have that love to wrap us all up. So man, it's been fun talking with you guys tonight. So we have to show those virtues in every day, and like you said, we have to learn it. And I know we'll hit on that next week, but on teaching and that, but that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah, it is.
Well, Steve, you want to close us in prayer tonight?
Sure, I will. Dear God, we thank you that the audience that we have with us, and we hope that you can you have gleaned something from what we have said, and that God has spoken through us, and be able to give you the word that you needed tonight. We hope that you will be back with us next week. This week we covered 12 to 17. Next week we'll cover 18 to 25 in the same chapter of Colossians. Just a small book with a whole lot in it, and we're hoping that you'll be with us next week at our roundtable discussion. This Sunday at 10 o'clock we have a service here, and we're in the building again, and we welcome you to come. All are welcomed. We do a little bit of social distancing, and we have ushers that will help you out with that. So please do come and join us next week. Thank you. Good night.